If everyone is muted and things are good, let's start. We're going to talk about homeopathy and alcoholism today. And by alcoholism, I don't just mean alcohol. It's a bunch of isms, a lot of substances. A lot of these remedies will apply to all sorts of situations in your life. And the reason I wanted to talk about homeopathy and alcoholism is we are going through a very stressful period. We're going through an extremely stressful period in history. We have never been so isolated from our loved ones ever before. This has been going on since March. Especially the elderly are isolated. Children are isolated from social contact. Adults are isolated from their workplaces. There are 20% of the companies, or not 20%, companies are laying off 20 to 30 to 40 to 100% of their people. And these are the adults that are feeding their families. So there's a lot of stress around alcoholism and substance abuse. Depression and suicide has gone through the roof. And what we want to say is there's a lot of answers. There's a lot of solutions. And so we don't need to despair. And we're going to talk about homeopathic remedies, dietary remedies in the context of addiction. Really, it's more addiction. If I can get to this. Again, we're talking about harmony in your mind, your soul, your vital force, and you want to know and appreciate and internalize that anything that happens here, anything that happens in your mind, to your environment, in your spirit or in your heart is going to affect your body. It's going to affect your body, it's going to affect your moods, and the way to treat that is with gentle understanding. And there's no gentler understanding than that of our true medicine, which is food and natural medicines like homeopathy. So a lot of people have said, is alcoholism a problem of moral character? Are you a bad person if you do cocaine or heroin or pot or alcohol? And I'm here to say that is not the case. Alcoholism, any kind of addiction really, is no more, no less than a problem of your biochemistry. Of course, it will be helped by having a peaceful spirit. Of course, it will be helped by not having stress situations in your life. But it is something that you can take control of and you can get better from. We have had Alcoholics Anonymous for decades and decades, and yet we find that the people that come out of Al-Anon, the relapse rates are very high. In your traditional psychotherapeutic rehab centers for heroin and cocaine, literally people come out and then a few days later they regress. So the recovery rate of these places is not stellar. And why is it not stellar? Because we are assuming that the body, that your mind somehow can control your body and you can just quit without dire effects. That is not the case. And there's this person by the name of Julia Ross who actually lives in Mill Valley, who wrote this wonderful breaking book called Mood Cure. Then she wrote a book on sugar addiction. I think it was The Sugar Cure or something, alcohol addiction, etc. And what she realized was that when she gave her clients or the people who were checked in nutritional supplements, which is amino acids of a certain kind, change their diet to be a high fat, high protein diet, these people's relapse rates changed and altered dramatically. They were not the same people. They could kick the alcohol habit, the crack or methamphetamine habit much, much more easily. Is it genetic or acquired? It could be genetic if you watch your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents drinking away, but it doesn't have to be your fate in life. It has to be nobody's fate in life. And what we're going to go through is actually literature from over 130 years ago, where a guy by the name of Jean-Pierre Gallavardin, a French doctor, treated alcoholism with homeopathy with stunning, spectacular results. He treated their children with very good results. He treated their symptoms when they were in the throes of alcohol or drug abuse, when they were seizing, when they were dying, when they had delirium tremens. He treated them with homeopathy. Julia Ross has treated people with neurotransmitters, with tyrosine for cocaine addiction, with L-glutamine for alcohol and sugar addictions. And so these things really, really work. The one thing that has led to this epidemic of dependency is the low-fat dogma. It's the food pyramid of 1970s, which said you should eat 6 to 11 servings of carbohydrates every day. No, you want to start with the fats and go down from there. You want to have rich animal fats in your diet. You want to have cholesterol. You see that molecule in the center? That's cholesterol. Cholesterol is present only in animal foods. When you start feeding an unwell person animal foods that are rich in cholesterol, such as egg yolk, that is 220 milligrams of cholesterol, or salmon bro, you find their mental makeup changes. They become stable. They're not suicidal anymore. Their hormones start to work better. They are able to cope with stress better. So if you have stress in your life today, please, if you can afford nothing else, if you can find nothing else in a store, eat egg yolks. Egg yolks contain cholesterol. Cholesterol is the mother of all hormones. It makes your cell membranes. It makes your vitamin D. It makes your hormones. It helps you with digestion by making bile acids. And more than anything else, it helps your brain function. So alcohol and cocaine and heroin addiction do not have to be problems of willpower. Let your diet assist you. Eat red meats, but above all, eat liver. Add liver to your diet, and I'll talk about the nutritional composition of liver in a second. Eat very, very good salt. So I would say eat as much salt as you need to eat. The salt needs to be this kind of salt, folks, the dirty colored salt. If you're iron deficient, eat the red salt or eat the Celtic salt. Each sea salt that is unrefined has different micronutrients, 80 trace elements that you don't need much of, but if you don't have them, if you're missing them, then you can not just get alcoholism, you can die. You can die. And so I would say, perish the current nutritional dogma. If anyone tells you fats are bad, forget about it. Or salt is bad, forget about it. The people who live the longest, the people who have the least cardiac disease, the least problems, the least coronary disease are the people who eat a lot of fats, who eat a lot of salts. These are the longest lived people in most major studies. So the Framingham study actually proved that people who ate more cholesterol were the most physically active, had the least disease, and lived the longest. That glob you're seeing here is liver. You might not like it too much, but give it another shot. Liver is cheap. Liver is the most nutrient-dense food there is out there. If you ate 100 grams, that is this much. A butter stick's worth of liver contains 476 milligrams of phosphorus. An apple contains 6 milligrams. It contains almost 9 milligrams of iron. An apple contains 0.1 milligrams. It contains 53,400 international units of vitamin A, and apples, carrots, and red meat, even red meat, contain minimal vitamin A. You need vitamin A to fight COVID. You need vitamin A to fight the influenza. You need vitamin A to fight cancer. You need vitamin A to fight infections. And you need vitamin A for good gut health. Your membranes, all your mucosa need vitamin A to function well. Your hormones need vitamin A. So I cannot stress enough the importance of liver. At our local store, the butchers, you get fabulous liver. I don't know if it's pastured or not, but it's beautiful liver, $2 a pound. If you can't find pastured liver, guys, go to a butcher, look at the quality of the liver, buy a little bit and eat liver twice a week. With fat, with animal fats. And why would you want to eat animal fats over plant fats? Because they contain cholesterol. They contain the long-chain conjugated linolenic acids. They contain fatty acids that your body needs. And they contain fat-soluble vitamins A, D, K, and E that you need to thrive. Plant fats only contain vitamin E and nothing else. All right. And so we're going to look at alcoholism or substance abuse or addiction and through the lens of a guy who lived over 150 years ago. Can you imagine being born in 1825? Not 1925, not 2025, 1825, almost 200 years ago. So there's this guy by the name, a French doctor by the name of Jean-Pierre Gallavardin, and there's a book he wrote called The Homeopathic Treatment of Alcoholism, in which he described 2,000 cases of alcoholics that he had cured simply with homeopathic medicine, without giving, without providing any guidance on diet or nutrition. He did it in the poorest of the poor slums of France of that period. People didn't have food on the table, much less, good fats and butter and lard and liver. He did it with homeopathics alone. So he got tired of treating rich people of substance abuse problems. And when he was around 60, he said, you know what, I'm going to start a free clinic. And where I'll treat all the substance abusers for free. So every Tuesday, starting February 6th, 1886, that's about 134 years ago, he started a clinic where he, in the first 3 years almost, he had 2,155 consultations. And about 1,400 of those were for alcoholics. And they use quaint terminology like libertines and persons suffering from jealousy, envy, avarice, laziness, irascibility. These are all words that were used to describe people with all sorts of problems, probably a lot of people with mental disease as well. And in his practice, he had a recovery rate of 50%. That's unprecedented. Alcoholics Anonymous, you're lucky if you get a 5 to 10% recovery rate. Every rehab center in the United States, practically, which is very expensive, by the way. Anyone know what the rehab center rates are? Thousands and thousands of dollars. Very, very expensive, and the relapse rates are 90 to 99%. Frequently, these people come out and commit suicide. So terrible, terrible prognosis. A lot of these, like most of them, were given these homeopathic treatments without their knowledge. So there was no placebo effect. They put these remedies in their food, in their soup, in their coffee even, in their wine, spirits, alcohol, and brandy even, without their knowledge, and their cravings went away. Alcoholism or substance abuse is really a sugar dysregulation. So if you fix your sugar, a lot of these things get fixed, which is why high fat and high protein are very, very, very important. And if you have any questions, please unmute your mics and feel free to ask questions. So while he did not know about insulin resistance, while he did not know about the causes of diabetes or sugar, he figured out that alcoholism, opium addiction, heroin addiction are problems that are not problems of the willpower. There are problems. You had a question? Okay, no question. These are problems of biochemistry, and that can be fixed with diet, and that can be fixed with homeopathics, and it works. He worked with substance abuse, he worked with acute alcohol and substance poisoning with very good results. And now, without further ado, we're gonna hide this thumbnail so I can read it. And that's how he wrote his book. He wrote about a particular homeopathic remedy called arsenicum album and its effects on a person who was poisoned by arsenicum versus its effects homeopathically. And this will give you some idea of how homeopathy actually works. And so this is Old English, so pardon me. He says, the knowledge of psychical effects, that's the psychological effects, may even aid legal medicine. So he's talking about how homeopathy helps in sleuthing out crimes, as the following fact demonstrates. In 1965, boy, I can't even imagine how long ago that was. Well, I was in Munster attending Bonninghausen's clinic. This is another homeopath. He said to me one day, while on a trip in my official capacity as Reiger Runsgraf, which is a civil servant, I met in a hotel certain magistrates who were about to begin an inquest concerning the alleged poisoning by means of arsenic. Back then, women used to kill off bad husbands with arsenic, or people used to do that, or nurses used to do that, of a husband by his wife. If you will tell me the moral and intellectual symptoms felt by that man just before his death, I shall probably be able to tell you whether arsenic was the poison used, and whether any of it will be found in the stomach of the deceased. Did he before dying, so he's asking this magistrate, did he before dying manifest frightful despair or great serenity? Was he restless? Did he have fear, doom, a sense of doom? Or was he very, very calm? The magistrate replies, very great despair. He was in the greatest despair. And then Bonninghausen said to him, he was poisoned by arsenic in such a large dose that some of it will be found in the digestive tract of this person. And how did he know that? Because he knows the homeopathic arsenicum album remedy. This drug produces a terrible despair through its primary effect, which is given in gross quantities. In real arsenic, if it's given to people, they will be in terrible despair. They'll be running around with a sense of doom, and then they'll drop dead. But if it's given in homeopathic prescription, which is diluted to the point where there's no molecules of arsenicum left in the remedy, what does it produce? It produces the opposite effect, which is complete serenity, complete peacefulness. And so therefore the magistrates took his word for it. They autopsied the body, and a huge amount of arsenic was found at the autopsy in the viscera of that man in the neighborhood of Munster, adds Bonninghausen. There was a woman who poisoned 16 persons with arsenical omelets. So she'd make omelets with arsenic in them and kill them. But the point here is, it's a funny thing, but the point here is, if the allopathic physicians had known the psychological effects of that substance, they would have discovered the poisoning before that woman had caused the death of so many people, because that's what precedes death, and then that's how you know it's arsenical poisoning. And the point of this is to understand that substances given in large quantities or physical doses have the ability to kill us. Alcohol has the ability to kill us in large doses. Small doses, it could be restorative. Cocaine, heroin, marijuana, meth, all of these are substances that can kill in large amounts. And the more we know about the psychological symptoms of these, the more we can apply homeopathic remedies to cure those conditions, to have those cravings cease, to ameliorate them from the inside out, so change the biochemistry of the person. So what he says is I'm going to put this down here, the 35 kinds of alcoholic drinks. So Jean-Pierre Gallavardin did a lot of analysis and research over decades. And that's something that we dropped the ball on over the last 150 years. We've been so concerned with substance abuse being a bad or a moral judgment or on a person, we're not thinking, hey, it's the food they're eating or what they're not eating. So he looked at all the alcoholic drinks that people drank, the 35 kinds of alcoholic drinks consumed by different nations of the world, and in his view, produce very, very different psychological effects. Beer leads to dullness of the mind as well as heaviness of the body. We know that. Anyone take a guess? Because beer is a carb. It's a heavy duty carb, 8 calories per gram. Of course, it goes straight to your belly. You drink a pint of beer daily, pretty soon you have a beer belly. You don't get the same with other types of alcohol. So you get a dullness of mind as well as heaviness of body with overconsumption of beer, to a departure from elevated and delicate sentiments to groveling desires. So this is Old English. Cider and pear cider produce nearly the same effects as beer. How smart was he? Because it's sugar. At the end of the day, it's sugar and alcohol. Absinthe, on the other hand, even in very small doses, makes you essentially an ill-natured and quarrelsome person. Brandy makes you aggressive and angry. Anisette clears the brain in small doses. And cherry brandy in small doses clears your brain, but large doses has the opposite effect. So once he figured out what these people were imbibing and looked at their psychological symptoms, he was actually able to treat them. And for instance, he said alcoholic drinks which were produced from potatoes and grain have a different type of alcohol. Produce a comatose ebriety, a comatose delirium, while alcohol from wine, which has ethyl alcohol, produces a merry, noisy, or angry ebriety. So you get angriness, you get comatose behavior, you get people are just falling down asleep, you get a lot of gay behavior. Some people become very talkative when they've had a little too much to drink. And a lot of it is dependent upon their constitutions and what they're actually drinking or eating.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the anisette, is that a positive thing to take because it clears the brain?
Yes and no. So in small quantities, all of these things are positive because they increase your heart rate. They might calm you down. Small amounts might put you to sleep. But if you're the type that can get addicted from these substances, then you're better off taking homeopathic remedies such as aconite or arsenicum to achieve the same effect.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so what has happened is people have used these as medicines historically for hundreds of years to treat themselves. You're working in like when the British were working in India in the hot sun, at the end of the day, they were so exhausted, they had to have their whiskey. And a little bit of whiskey was a pick-me-up. Pretty soon, a whole bunch got addicted to whiskey, and you had this whole bunch of alcoholics. And so the line is fine, and you want to see if there are better ways. Coffee, tea, same thing. Coffee, tea, caffeine is a stimulant. So all of these are stimulants in small amounts. If taken in larger amounts, they become drugs. If taken over a long time, eventually their stimulant effect wears off. So if you drink coffee every day, pretty soon, it doesn't give you the kind of high it used to before. And so homeopathically speaking, there are things like arnica or aconitum or other remedies that will give you that pep. Food that'll give you that pep without having to resort to chemicals that'll give you a temporary high and then a permanent low, or a multi-hour low for a 5-minute high, and so on. There was a study in Kerala just a couple of years back where they treated alcoholism by giving, I think it was 74 alcoholics were selected, and they 67% reduction in alcoholism. About half of them were completely cured within a 6-month period. And they found that, and these were all people, most of them were alcoholics who were slipped remedies by their family members. So they didn't know they were getting these remedies. So there was a great deal of amelioration. So what I'm trying to say is homeopathy is a very, very under-recognized methodology for just doing normal everyday things and treating your loved ones. If you see your husband or your son-in-law or your sister or your brother getting stressed out, if you go there and instead of drinking 1 glass of wine, they're taking 4 glasses of wine, there are remedies you can give to them that will actually reduce their craving for that substance. That will, because there's a reason people eat these substances, folks. It's not because they enjoy it per se. It allows them to survive. It allows their stress to ameliorate for a few minutes, for a few hours. If you're in pain, a lot of people take alcohol and cannabis, etc., as pain management substances. And before you know it, it becomes a habit. When you see that, try and give that person a water dose of Nux vomica, 1 m. Nux vomica 1 m twice a day. You can drop it in their soup, you can give it to them, you can do whatever you like, but it has had very good effect on about 70% of the population. So about 50 people of the 74 responded very well to Nux vomica in this pilot study of homeopathic treatment in the management of alcoholism. Now we're going to talk about remedies for symptoms which appear, and this doesn't apply just to alcohol. I'm just using that as a proxy for alcohol. Other addictions, any number of other addictions that bring out similar symptoms. Alcohol, cannabis, CBD, heroin, cocaine, meth, opium, hashish, synthetic things, methadone even, sleeping pills, pain pills, fentanyl, you name it. There are remedies. And so sleeping remedies, people take a lot of sleeping pills. There are far better and gentler homeopathic remedies that'll help you wean off of those and make your whole life of a better quality. So the remedies for use when you're having the ill effects of abuse are primarily Nux vomica, Hepar sulf, belladonna, cantharis, china, Coffea cruda, Hyoscyamus, Ignatia, Phosphorus, Stramonium, Veratrum album. I would keep these in the 200 potency as well as in the very, very low potencies, which is 3, 6, etc. So you want to use the low potencies for continuous administration when the person is in dire straits. And you want to give the high potency to have a more curative effect where it's an ongoing therapy of sorts. If a person is actually having a seizure from an alcoholic overdose, then you administer these in very, very low doses. You take a few globules, a few pills in like a half a cup of water, you stir it, and every few minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes, you give that person a half a teaspoon, a half a teaspoon, a half a teaspoon, and they will get better. And if you can get your hands on that book, Alcoholism and Homeopathy and Alcoholism, you can see example after example of wonderful cures that he's had with a lot of these situations. And I should have cited some cases, but I wanted to keep it short. If you have convulsions, if your child or your significant other or someone you know and love tends to go into delirium tremens or they have convulsions, Nux vomica and belladonna. In small doses, water doses, administer into their mouth. So just don't give them pills. They might bite their teeth or their tongue. Just kind of pull up their lip and put the water dose in. You can do a syringe as well. If the person becomes extremely jealous upon imbibing the substance, then the remedy is Nux vomica, hyoscyamus, lachesis, and Staphylococcus aureus. And acts of jealousy means they're taking a knife to somebody and saying, I'm going to kill you because I suspect you of having an affair or some such thing. If the person wants to strike or commit violence, again, Nux vomica is a great starter remedy, but hepar sulf, if someone wants to kill with a knife, someone likes the sight of a knife makes them want to pick it up and stab someone, hepar sulf is a great remedy. Veratrum album is a great remedy. Hyoscyamus is a great remedy. If they have fury, which is a desire, you know, people who go and destroy stuff, they'll put their hand through the drywall. You want to give them Veratrum album 200C, or you want to give them belladonna, although I don't know how you'd get it into them, but you can figure it out. You give them water or give it to them through food or some such things. If they have a desire for killing others, this is an official disease. You know, there are people who look at a knife or who have this deep desire to kill their children or their husband or their wives or their friends. They just have this desire. Belladonna will cure that. Hepar sulf, depending on if the symptoms fit. But what I'm doing is shrinking these remedies down to 2 or 3 so that you can then read up about them in the Materia Medica and say, okay, my husband or my friend is more like a hepar sulf character and not a hyoscyamus, so let me give them hepar sulf. It'll have a very immediate and good effect. If the patient has a tendency to commit suicide, they want to kill themselves, arsenicum album, if they want to poison or stab themselves or hang themselves or stand in the middle of traffic, arsenicum album. They have deep despair, they have a sense of doom, give them arsenicum album, they'll calm down. If they want to kill themselves more violently, like by stabbing, firearms, shooting themselves, drowning. So in a lot of cases, people are very dejected. They have come to a point in their life where all of a sudden life is not worth living. If you see that in a neighbor or a friend, please, please give them a dose of Nux vomica. It's the best thing you could do for someone you care about. Or arsenicum album. Belladonna, if they want to kill themselves by poisoning, stabbing, hanging, especially throwing them, the violence, especially like the people who jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. I swear, if they'd had a dose of belladonna, their minds would have been changed. Jumping from a high place. These are violent types of suicidal thoughts. And anyone who can have that feeling, that desire, is not in control. And what homeopathy is doing is it's bringing their vital force back to even keel, where all of a sudden those feelings just get calmer. They just get calmer. And this is not just for, folks, this is not just for substances. This could be for a person who has not eaten or eaten the wrong foods or is addicted to certain foods and has certain symptoms. These can be administered to, you know, if you are on a sugar high or if you're in sugar withdrawal, you get angry, you get, you know, you feel this, you get this tingling sensation in your finger, you're just like a cat on a hot tin roof. Arsenicum album or a Nux vomica will calm you down. So keep that on hand. It's a great remedy to keep on hand. There are some people who cheer up, like wine. You have wine or you have certain drugs. If you're an inherently quiet person, imbibing that beverage will cheer you up, and that's why a lot of people, to get out of themselves, will drink. And pretty soon they're drinking and they're cheerful, and then they're drinking more and they're not so cheerful, so they just increase the drinking, and then they're cheerful after they've consumed a lot of drink, and therein lies the addiction. So coffea cruda is great for that. Opium, that's the homeopathic opium, is great for people who are very hyper cheerful and gay. That's when they engage in behaviors that are very risky. They'll party on top of a roof. You know, they'll want to jump off, you know, of 10 foot high areas because they're just happy. If they're playing the comedy, stramonium and belladonna, if they get really funny, they're very comical, extraordinarily. So people in mania, people who are in the manic stages of bipolar illness, stramonium and belladonna will calm them down. Sometimes some of these beverages will make people more intelligent. They speak more intelligently, whereas previously they were stumbling, they're stammering or stuttering. Sulfur, calcarea, carbonica are the remedies for that. Some people just stop thinking, like I am one of those. I need stramonium if I ever get drunk. It makes me stupid. I have a couple of glasses or a glass of wine even, and I can't talk, I can't think, I can't put two thoughts together. And when that happens, opium is a great remedy, stramonium is a wonderful remedy. Some people fall sleepy, a glass of wine, and they're out like a rock, and people will have a drink at night just to do that, except that you then start to get alcoholic insomnia at 1, 2, 3 in the night. So these kinds of substances are not wonderful substances to make you sleep at night, folks. But humanity is so inured. We drink tea in the morning and coffee to wake us up, and we have a drink of brandy or whiskey or a glass of wine to knock us out at night. If we instead had maybe pulsatilla or something else to pick us up in the morning, or food, real food, and you had coffea cruda or arsenicum to knock us out at night, we would be far better off. We'd be far better off because your body wants to do what's right for it. And what you're doing is you're taking the vital force and you're stabilizing it. For people who talk constantly when they're drunk or under the influence, lachesis and causticum are wonderful, wonderful remedies. I know people who they have 2 glasses of wine and it's like a monologue. They talk about politics and they monopolize the conversation and you can't stop them. They can talk for 6 hours straight. Give that beloved person of yours lachesis or causticum in their wine even. They'll get better. And they'll start to talk in their right minds instead of under the influence. Hepar sulf, petroleum, magnesium, I missed that. If they get, if they're very angry, hepar sulf is good. Petroleum, if they're very subdued after they've drunk. If they're yelling and shouting, stramonium is great. If they're going from topic to topic, ignatia is great. And causticum is a great remedy too, if it matches. If they're being exhibitionist along with yelling and shouting, they take their clothes off. The best remedy is hyoscyamus. If they take or expose themselves or take their clothes off, hyoscyamus. Some people become very insulting. All the things that they had kept, inside of them come out after a couple of glasses of something or the other. Nux vomica, hepar sulf, and petroleum. Great remedies for that. If they're very complaining, they become very picky, they kvetch a lot, they blame a lot, before, during, and after that substance, then hydrastis is a great remedy. Nux vomica continues to be good throughout. Causticum and lachesis are great remedies. So judge it. These are reference points for you to don't put them on your fridge, please. I would say put them in a drawer. And if you see this sort of thing going on, just give the person a few pills or give them a water dose and say, hey, look, this will help you cope with the quarantine. And they might just use other substances less. If they say what they did not mean to say or do before getting drunk or abusing that substance, lachesis, belladonna, and sulfur are great. So there are people who will just bring up things from 20, 30 years ago under the influence or before or after. Lachesis, belladonna. Can't keep secrets. Lachesis, belladonna, sulfur. And then, so these were symptoms that appear when you're in active use, right? convulsions, jealousy, fury, taking the knife, jumping off the bridge, committing suicide, too much cheerfulness, or too much funniness, or yelling. These are actual symptoms that are occurring when you are under the influence of something. And these are the remedies for that. Now we get to the heavy part. And the problem here is oftentimes I see these are wonderful men who got married, who got children. The first child was born, and yeah, that was awesome. Second child was born. By the time the third child comes around, there's pressure on them to perform. They now have to go to work no matter what. By the time the fourth or fifth child comes, they're saying, shit, how do I pay for tuition? What happens if I die? I have to work an extra shift in order to support my family. Same thing happens with women. They might be the sole providers for their family. They're doing laundry or washing, or and they're just overburdened, and they drink or they do substances to have more energy, to get rid of the pain, to deal with their sorrows or their cares. They're good people who are just very brutally affected by life. For such people, drink or substances or heroin or cocaine provides a means for dealing with those sorrows in a way that makes them forget it for a little bit. And Nux vomica is a great remedy. These people can get violent. The bad part, these are wonderful people who, when under the influence, can get violent, often cross. Their sorrows or cares lead them to drink, to forget. They spit frequently. That's what he saw. I have not seen that in the cases I've worked with. Mild-tempered people, originally or ordinarily mild-tempered, kind, affectionate people who, under the influence, can become brutal. They can strike, and it's not limited to one kind of person, or not, it can be anybody. They can strike, insult, they can weep, they have a tendency to jealousy, envy, suicide, shooting, stabbing before, during drunkenness. They're inclined to be sad during their non-drunken phases, because now you went from an up to a down. So you created these ups and downs in your life that get increasingly steeper, causing more and more problems. They have a longing for red. They dream about evening. When can I get to that glass of wine? White wine, beer. And these are a lot of gentle people. They're high-performing people who can't wait for it to be 6 o'clock so they can have their glass of whatever. These people often get inclined to drunk for lack of anything else to do. They don't have outlets frequently. They can't. Neurotic men and women addicted to drunkenness during or after pregnancy. When you have postpartum depression, believe it or not, 100 years ago, that's how women dealt with their moods after pregnancy, by getting drunk. Licentious or not, sometimes only in the imagination, sometimes immoral. I mean, they become looser. They have a mania for refusing treatment even in urgent cases. So if a person is really under the influence, they are not going to agree that they are an alcoholic or a drug addict, right? Otherwise, they would have done something about it. So frequently, family members don't commit them. They just give them these remedies. They're living in the warmth, comfort, and nest of their family while they're getting these remedies. And let me tell you about the rehab facilities. First of all, you're locked in, you're terrified, you're away from your family, you're getting medicines, which are essentially drugs replacing other drugs, to deal with the withdrawal from the substance you were addicted to. So now you're hooked on oxyfentanyl, OxyContin, uppers, downers, sleeping pills, antidepressants, which are in many ways far more toxic than what they were doing. And it doesn't address the fundamental problem, which is really a sugar problem. They have low blood sugar, they have hormone imbalances, they might have Addison's or Graves' disease or an autoimmune disease that never got cured. It got layered over with drugs and substances and alcohol. Then they became violent, so they got sent to a rehab facility where they're feeling traumatized, they're feeling ashamed, they're in withdrawal from their habits, and they're getting allopathic treatments, which are extremely toxic. They come out and they die. Frequently they'll die or they'll regress. If you have questions, please pop up. So this is what's happening. So they will have mania for refusing treatment. They will refuse treatment if presented with it because they don't think they have a problem. Sometimes they will steal. Oftentimes you find people stealing from their family's paychecks or kitty. They're shrewd. You're given a choice between feeding their child milk versus cocaine. They will go for the cocaine. So you don't want to judge that because literally this person is in a battle for their life. They're not thinking. And so I would withhold moral judgments, give them nux vomica and see what happens. They could be inclined to constipation, to diarrhea. So they have a lot of gastrointestinal problems. They're not nourished. Vomiting, regurgitation. They might have other habits besides like tobacco, gambling. They might spend their family's wealth. They might be stingy with their family and open-handed with their buddies at the bar. That's a nux vomica, folks. Nux vomica 1N. The Kerala study had good results. Galavardin had excellent results with nux vomica. I reckon it'll work on 80% of the people out there. All right. So nux vomica, I took a while to talk about nux vomica because it's a great remedy for any kind of addictive substance and fits a lot of symptoms. There are others that I'm going to say they will help in about 2 to 10% of the cases. Lachesis, these are they're ill-natured people, hard to get along with, very jealous, inclined to talk a lot, violent criminals, vindictive, wicked. And so a lot of these things are really things that can be helped with homeopathic remedies. They don't kill themselves, but they're inclined to kill others. Big difference. Arsenicum is wanting to kill themselves. Belladonna wants to take their own life. Lachesis wants to kill others. They talk a lot. They have appetite for brandy and absinthe and tobacco users. So that's a lachesis cure. And you want these in the 200 at a minimum. So the nux vomica, the lachesis, the causticum, the sulfur, the calcarb, the heparsulf and arsenicum album, the mercurius vivis, which is the same as the solubilis almost, and the petroleum, the opium, the staphylos agria. So these are the remedies you want to have on hand for longer-term treatment to cure addictions. You find that if you're addicted to a certain food, nux vomica really helps to stabilize your blood sugar, etc. So lachesis is one kind of person. Causticum, these people tend to be fussy, quarrelsome, they'll cheat you, they cry a lot, they're maudlin. You know, the standard picture of a person who weeps into their drink, that's a causticum. Genital overexcitement, so they get very sexually stimulated before and during addiction, before and during the phase of drunkenness. They have a desire for brandy and wine. This is for people also who have lost their loved ones, people who have lost people to battles and trauma and have great indifference. They want to die, but they don't want to kill themselves. Tobacco users, so they're really slowly destroying their body. They're very sad. I had an uncle like that, actually. He was very sad. He wanted to be a writer and a poet, and he was forced into the family business, and he kind of took to drink, and he kept going. And all his life, he wrote really beautifully. And I always think if he had gotten to do what he wanted to do, maybe he wouldn't have gone down the path of alcoholism. And maybe causticum would have helped him. Sulfur. This is psoriatics, people who suffer from hemorrhoids, skin problems, who work and go to sleep a little slowly with a prolonged but not restful sleep. So they get up. They get drunk in secret. Frequently, these are the closet alcoholics you don't even know, or they're closet cocaine users. You don't know until you accidentally find the powder on the bathroom counter. They've been doing it for 10 years and doing it very, very sneakily. They're more intelligent while they are drunk. When they're drunk, they say and do very deep things, deep observations, things they couldn't say or do before. They tend to be overweight, thoughtless, harem-scarum. Sometimes they'll lie, they're envious, sometimes shrewd. They can steal to get to their means of survival, which is their fixes. That's sulfur. But the keynote here is skin, hemorrhoids, getting drunk in secret, doing it in secret. Calcarea carbonica, this is a particular personality. They're heavyweight, they're overweight generally. They don't have the strength of will to accomplish what they wanted to do, and they're sad. They just don't like certain people for no rhyme or reason. They can, but they're doing it on a lower level. These are not people who are going to go and commit violent crime. You know, they get tired after they've done too much mental work. They can be envious, hateful, or vindictive, but at a lower level, not in violence. Largely, they have an absence of will. So if they have decided not to drink and someone comes and pulls a bottle of wine, they will not be able to say no. That's Calcarea carbonica. They really need their structure reinforced, Calcarea carbonica. Think of it like that. They need to have an internal skeleton to hold themselves strong. They have exoskeletons. They're affected by what other people are doing or thinking or saying. Hepar and arsenicum album. Hepar is people who are not very affectionate. They're kind of mean, easily angered. They can commit homicide. They're inclined to be criminal. These are especially teenagers who get into substance abuse at a very early age. You know, they become criminals, and they can't work unless they have the substance. That's Hepar salt. Arsenicum, they can be wicked, vindictive, merciless, sometimes jealous, inclined to commit crimes, inclined to suicide by stabbing, poisoning, or hanging. They're always thirsty for small sips of water, even water. They can vomit, and more yet, they tend to have more diarrhea. And they tend to persecute others. So that's the characteristics of an R-cell. Mercurius vivis is always dissatisfied with everything, everybody, themselves. And you might think these are a lot of words, but if you know of people or have known of people who are under the influence of something or the other, I will bet you, if you try it, you can pinpoint them. This is not rocket science. You and I can do it to the right remedy. Mercurius, always dissatisfied, everybody in themselves. They're not satisfied. They tend to have dental problems. They tend to have gums that are bleeding or swollen. They tend to salivate a lot. They tend to have neuralgias, diarrhea, dysentery, worms. They're great gamblers. They'll literally spend by day what they earn, day by day what they earn. And frequently it'll happen that they got a disease, it got suppressed. They had a headache, it got suppressed with a pain medication. They got cancer, it got suppressed with chemo, radiation, and all that. They got antibiotics for an infection, and so it has changed their makeup. Their microbiota are dead. Their intestines are not working well, and they can't help themselves. Petroleum, people are without energy, without this, so they literally have low physical energy, and they just can't refuse the addictive substance. They cannot tolerate it. They vomit it up with the least excessive drink, and they talk a lot, and they're drunk. Opium drinkers are generally brandy drinkers or hard liquors. They get drunk over humiliations. And a lot of us do that. You know, the boss yelled at us or wife was mean. You go to the bar and you drink through your humiliation. They weep easily. Opium weeps easily. They're either very gay or just completely out of it, or they get sleepy while drunk. That would be me. I would be an opium. They will get drunk on anything, cider, beer, ethyl, or amyl. They have a very low tolerance for alcohol, and that's an opium. But yet they're addicted. Staphysagria is, they imagine they can restore their organism. So they're licentious. They know when they are drunk, they become very, very sexually active. They abuse alcoholic liquor rather than by means of mild liquors, not stronger liquors. So more like beer, ciders, wines, and so on. They're very sad before, during, and after the substance abuse. They're hypochondriacs. They fear. They're fearing for their health. They've got conspiracies. They're inclined to pursue. A lot of them are single people. Or husbands that are wandering around, or jealous people, and that's staphysagria. That's a very typical onanism. These people tend to abuse milder liquid, and they're sad. They're basically sad, and they're doing this to drown out their sadness. And then we come to the question of, okay, my grandparents were serious alcoholics, my parents were alcoholics, or you know, my mother abused cocaine when she was pregnant with me. What do I do about myself and my children? Gallavardin actually discovered that if you caught the children of these substance abusers early enough, it could actually take out, and again, this points, he was so smart back in that day, he pointed to the biochemical nature of the disease. We judge people for doing the things that they do, but it is their biochemistry really that's causing either nutritional deficiencies, poison in their bodies, or a lifestyle problem, but that's essentially your biochemistry. And a lot of them had low blood sugar. So what do you do with children of people like that who did not have maternal nutrition or the right paternal sperm quality? You know, the dad was a cocaine addict or a heroin addict when the child was conceived. If they are over the age of 14, Gallavardin says, and I don't have experience of this, but he's had plenty of experience, 13 remedies, each remedy for about 40 days. And the potency is 200 C. So you take sulfur, 1 dose, in water. So you take a few globules of sulfur, put it in water, stir, 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 take a teaspoon. That's 1 dose of sulfur, 200 C. Wait 40 days, administer nux vomica to the child. Wait 40 days, administer arsenic amalgam, then mercurius vivis, then opium, then lachesis, then pulsatilla. Then you administer petroleum and wait 60 days. I misspelled that, sorry. Then conium maculatum, wait 60 days. Causticum, wait 60 days. Medcarb, wait 60 days. Medcarb, by the way, is a great remedy for a small child that's feeling distress when mom leaves him at the daycare for the first day. It can mean the difference between a child that howls for days on end and a child that quickly gets over their fear and starts to play in a strange environment. Anyhow, Medcarb for 60 days. Staphysagria, 40 days. Calcarb, 60 days, and then you're done. That's for children over 14. The dose is 200 C. If they're under 14, you change the dose to a lower dose, a 30 C, and you wait half the time to administer the next remedy. So if it was sulfur, you do a 30 C of sulfur, and you would do 20 days of wait before you went to the next one. And that brings us to the end of our talk. And if anyone has questions, now's the time to ask. Does anyone have questions? Or I can stop the recording.
I have some questions. I have a couple questions. One, going back to the Nux Vomica 1M, you said it was a water dose. Can it just be the little pills too, or is water dose the best?
Absolutely, it can be anything. The water dose will work really good. The pill will work also, and when you don't have a choice, you can just do whatever. You can crush the pill, put it in food. You can do just pill. You could do pill in water form. But the water dose is powerful because it goes deeper. It, it has to touch all the nerve endings in a mucosal surface, and so water doses are generally better. But whatever you can get.
Okay. And then like choosing between, you listed a whole bunch of remedies. Would you do like the opium or coffea instead of the Nux Vomica, like for long term, or would you just do the Nux Vomica long term?
So here's the thing, Nux Vomica works for 80% of the population. And
Okay.
if the symptoms match, I would start with Nux Vomica. If nothing happens, I would go to the peculiar symptoms of the other remedies.
Okay.
In general, but if you know the person really well, if the person is a lachesis, then don't waste your time with a Nux Vomica.
Okay, and then can you go over again the difference between, using a low potency versus the high potency?
Yes. The high potencies is for curing the addiction. The low potencies is when they're in the middle of an episode stemming from the addiction. So you do not want to give a person who's having epileptic seizures from overdose of cocaine or heroin, alcohol, a high dose. They will die. You want to give them a very, very low dose, like 3 or 6 or 12, and give it very, very frequently, so that as their symptoms diminish, you keep giving it to them until they go away. A high dose you cannot administer as frequently.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Carbonica in addition.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
I'm so sad.
No more question. So thank you, everybody. I'm gonna stop the sharing, and I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'll put this up so people can rewatch it and look at the remedies again at a later point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.